Experiences. Greetings you from Panama, Panama City. Let me introduce myself. I am Jair do Castillo, in charge of Mashav International Scholarship for the Embassy of Israel in Panama. Let's talk in this webinar about challenges, the new frontier towards normality. But first one, let's introduce a video about our Mashav Training Center in Israel.
Mashav, Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation, was launched in 1958, only 10 years after the State of Israel gained its independence. Mashav was established with the aim of sharing Israeli know-how, innovation, and technologies with developing countries to achieve sustainable development and transformation within their own societies. Mashav's ultimate goal is to bring change, hope, and opportunity for everyone, sharing knowledge and ideas with all. Mashav has been active in 140 countries worldwide, training more than 300,000 people in a broad variety of fields. MATC, Mashav Agricultural Training Center, is responsible for international agricultural cooperation to ensure food security and sustainable agricultural development. METC, Mashav Educational Training Center, focuses on education at all levels, including education for sustainable development, teachers training, and curriculum development, programs for youth at risk, education for science and technology, young leadership, and a comprehensive drug control strategy. MCTC, Mashav Carmel Training Center, is dedicated to the advancement of women's leadership, innovation and entrepreneurship, gender equality, and women's empowerment. Mashav initiates active dialogues with fellow nations and international organizations, creating partnerships for development all around the world. We place people at the heart of development. We invest efforts in our human capacity building, working with local stakeholders and communities to develop innovative and creative solutions to overcome pressing development challenges. In alignment with the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, we are committed to continue empowering fellow nations in the fight against poverty and inequality, to overcome development challenges, and achieve a better future for all.
Excellent work done. Our training center preparing professionals all around the world, explaining a little bit more what Mashav is. Israel Agency for International Development Cooperation. As a member of the family of the nation, the State of Israel, through worldwide sustainable development and social equity to overcome development challenges with a strong emphasis of leaving no one behind. In alignment with the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, Mashav addressed development challenge by presenting a comprehensive and holistic approach, including the incorporation of several cross-cutting issues such as gender equality, health, education, and environmental issues. With this context, we believe it's imperative to implement and integrate innovative approach, one that combines all components of the development assistance. And now, let me introduce Dr. Colin Bowell. She was graduated in Brown School of Public Health and Community Medicine at Federal University Hadassah, Jerusalem, Israel. Welcome, Dr. Bowell. How are you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Castillo. And it's definitely a pleasure to have been one of the products of Mashav's investment in public health. So to begin, I would like to share some experiences that I would have had. And I also want, because I've had the question several times, being asked of me, what exactly is public health? So public health is basically protecting the health of the entire population, whether be it our small communities at the national level, regionally, or globally. So what it has to do, we promote healthy lifestyles, we do researches, and we detect, prevent, and research infectious diseases such as the COVID-19. So I was of the last batch, I was one of the graduates at the Brown School of Public Health and Community Medicine in Jerusalem, Israel. That was a very unique experience for me. The public health program, it was just not academics, it was also academics and the culture. So we had the opportunity to visit many educational sites, but we also had the opportunity to visit many religious sites and also to interact with the other programs, such as the students of the agricultural program in Israel. So we would have had a very good experience in the first semester, because when we started the program on the 30th of October 2019, there was no pandemic. However, in the second semester, there was the challenge of the COVID-19. So things changed a bit for us, and we moved from in-classroom experience to having our classes on Zoom. We did not have a problem with the transition because the resources were available, the infrastructure was available to us. However, there were a lot of concerns because we were away from our families, and that maybe was one of the biggest challenges for many persons, because we had the necessary resources, the internet, we had the Wi-Fi, and also data on our phone. We also had computers. If we did not have our own personal computers, we had computers that the school provided for us, and the school also took care of our physical, psychological, and social well-being, because during the time we had weekly meetings on Zoom to see how we're doing, how we're feeling, how our families are doing. It was just not how we're doing, how our families are doing, because we were away from our families. And also we had very few social activities because we could no longer move as we liked. There was a period of lockdown, but whenever we did, all measures were taken. So I will get into a few of the challenges that I would have noticed or that I would have identified. And I would love for us to have a conversation, and I would love for persons who are here also to share their experiences also, or any myth busters that we're going to share here, or any information that I'm going to share. So some of the challenges that I want to speak of today, the first one is navigating the infodemic. Now, the infodemic is just the flood of information that we receive about the COVID-19. So that's what we call the infodemic. The myth busters. So we want to bust some myths. We want to talk about vaccine, because we know there is no cure, and we know our best option at the moment. We're looking at vaccines. And we want to talk about mental health, and it's very much appropriate because we've recently celebrated World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October, as we do every year. And we know for many countries, it's an area that's underfunded. So we need to have greater investment in mental health. So to begin with navigating the infodemic, I would share some information from the World Health Organization on how we can navigate this information. We know that our information comes from word of mouth, it comes from online means, social media, whether it be websites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the different social platforms. And many times it's difficult for us to cipher out what is good information, what is bad information. But of course, when we share information, we want that to be good information, positive information. Now, sometimes there's information that is shared. It is even healthcare workers, we're not sure about what the information is, but we share the information, and the information is not correct. Now that is misinformation, because we do not have any intention to do any harm. However, there are persons who would share misleading information with the intent to do harm or cause damage, or maybe for some profit or something, and that is disinformation, and we need to combat both misinformation and disinformation. So this is how we can navigate the infodemic. So first, we need to assess the source of our information. It's really important that you know in your country where you're going to get your information about the cases in your country, about what measures you need to take, what is always the latest that's happening with COVID-19 in your country. And we need to identify that source. For us here in Guyana, it's the Ministry of Public Health page. We have it both on Facebook, and we can always check it if it's once or twice a day for the update. Also, we have the World Health Organization, very informative, UNICEF, but we need to ensure that we are getting it from credible sources. Now, you also need to verify your sources sometimes. So that is also important. Two, we go beyond the headlines. Headlines can just be there, because it's sensational. So you put something really nice that's going to capture everybody's attention, and they're going to be clicking, 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 and sharing it. But when you read the information, it is not actually accurate. And we need to be careful with that, because if we just share based on headlines, even us as healthcare professionals, we can share misinformation. Now, thirdly, we need to identify the author, and you need to make sure that it's somebody that's credible, right? So we can go online and we can check and see if this is a real person, it's credible, it's somebody who has scientific facts. We need to do that. You also check the date of your information. Is it up to date? Is it relevant? Is it, pertaining to what is going on now? Very important that we check these details. You examine the supporting evidence, and this one way in doing this, you can also check multiple sources to see, what is going on. Is this saying one thing and everything else is saying something else? You examine supporting evidence. Check your biases, because we all have our biases. We all have our own opinions. We all have our own feelings. And sometimes our biases can affect our judgment. So we need to be also very careful of that. Now you turn to fact checks. So we need to consult trusted fact-checking organization. Like I said, if you're locally, you can check your Ministry of Health. And you need to be careful, because locally you might say, okay, I have my radio, but then there's multiple shows that you have on your radio or your television, and sometimes the person could be sharing misinformation. So you turn to more likely the ministry's information, because they would get their information from trusted organizations such as the World Health Organization. I don't know if anybody else has anything to share as it relates to navigating the infodemic, which would be important for us, because I know everyone that's going to join is coming with a wealth of information, and it's really important that we have these discussions. So I don't know if Oren wants to share anything about this, or Dr. Washington that I saw before coming off, because my screen is up. If there's anything that you would like to share.
I was muted. I'm sorry. Um, I think COVID-19, because there is no vaccine. I think we need to be responsible. We need to obey the basic rules in society, where we need to protect ourselves and protect others around us. So a degree of being responsible is what we need to be. We need to be socially distanced. We need to wash your hands, but more importantly, we need to wear a mask. These droplets can remain in the air for 8 to 15 minutes. If you know you're not going to be within 6 feet of someone, wear a mask. It's not. It makes sense. As a matter of fact, I think it's disrespectful to not wear a mask. And if somebody is coming too close, you need to let them know, please. You know, please. We need to be socially distant. If we
Yeah.
protect ourselves, then we protect the people around us, and at the same time protecting ourselves. COVID-19 is a faceless enemy. There's no way to. There's no. It's not a color. You don't have a special face. You don't look a certain way. It's our behavior. So we have to change our behavior, and we have to be responsible, and we have to be respectful.
Yeah.
And again, with respect to information, we just can't repeat the things we hear unless it's
Yeah.
factual. We should not repeat it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's true. We need to share the accurate information. So now I want to go into some mythbusters, and these are the most common ones that you hear every day, because age for many persons, as in the first picture, you can see there's persons of different age groups. Many times you hear younger persons saying, well, it doesn't affect us most because we're younger, but that's not true. Anyone can be infected by the coronavirus. And particularly, we understand that persons who are older and persons who have co- um, comorbidities are more vulnerable, but at the same time, we all need to take precautions because anyone can be infected with COVID-19. As it relates to medications, you often hear persons saying that, okay, this medication can cure, or when I was in the hospital, I got antibiotics. And I think it's important that we have persons understand that there's no medication to prevent or cure COVID-19. The different vitamins and minerals that persons are using can boost their immune system, but it does not prevent or cure COVID-19. And also, as it relates to the antibiotics, persons need to understand if you were admitted and you had COVID 19 and you were being treated, but you were also receiving antibiotics, it was for some co infection that you had and not for the COVID 19. And you being free of COVID 19 just means that you're no longer infectious, but it was not that the antibiotic cured you. Another important myth buster is that of the use of alcohol. Many persons believe that, if you drink a lot of alcohol, you can disinfect yourself and COVID 19 will not affect you. Definitely, it's not true. And it brings many problems with it. And it can also affect persons' mental health. So if persons need to regulate their intake of alcohol, and if you're not using alcohol during the pandemic, it's not a good time to start. And we know it comes with a whole host of social problems and cognitive problems. You're not able to take care of yourself, and you might more pick up the virus because you're not able to wear your mask correctly or make good judgments. And you can also get into accidents and all these things, right? And of course, you get into an accident and die. COVID 19 is the least of your problem. Also, as it relates to weather, you hear persons saying things like, okay, there's certain climates that, you can get COVID 19 and other climates you wouldn't. Not true. You can get it in hot climates, humid climates, and the snow just wouldn't prevent you from getting COVID 19. So these things are not true, and it is scientifically proven, and we want persons to understand this. Another important myth buster is the 5G internet. Many persons have been saying that, okay, you can get it, but you need to understand that viruses cannot travel through radio waves or mobile networks. It's transmitted via the droplets, which of course, if a person speaks to you, or a person sneezes or coughs, and you're very close to them, you're not wearing your mask, or you get into contact with a surface that's infected, and then you rub your eyes, nose, or mouth, you can get infected. But those viruses cannot travel through the mobile networks. I'm not saying if someone uses your phone and then that gets on your phone and then you collect your phone, the phone is a surface. But as it relates to being transmitted through the waves, no, not through. So vaccine, it's also another very important thing for us to discuss, because at the moment there's no vaccine, but there were articles that I saw going around with that they say the vaccine that's used for pneumonia is effective for COVID-19. Definitely not true. And when there is a vaccine, I would definitely recommend that vaccine for persons, because the World Health Organizations and your governments, they are not going to give you something that the science does not support. So you need to understand the importance of vaccine. And it's not the first time that we will be developing a vaccine, because we know the yellow fever vaccine and all these different vaccines that we're being accustomed to. The only reason we're taking so long now to get a vaccine, of course, because it's a new virus. So of course, studies have to be done. They will not just give the population anything. They have to make sure that it's well studied and there's scientific facts that can say, okay, persons can receive this vaccine. So definitely, I would recommend persons to take their vaccine when that time comes, because you protect yourself and you protect me and you protect your family and friends, you protect the people in your workplace, you protect persons when you travel. So it would be important for persons to take their vaccine. I'm gonna slow here a little also to see if there's anything that anyone wants to add as it relates to the Mythbusters. Okay. Okay. So, okay, I will move on to how we can keep ourselves and others safe. And it's more of being practical because this here is theory, but many times in the reality, we have to be practical in our situation. And also when we take information that is written, as they say, think global, act local. When we take information from all the organizations, we also have to adjust it many times to our situation in our country. And even at a national level, sometimes within the country, within communities, you have to also adjust those recommendations. So it's important that we think global, but we act local. So you maintain at least a 1 meter distance between yourself and others. Very important, sometimes not always possible, and that's why it's recommended that you always wear your mask and do take the necessary precautions. You make sure you make a mask, wearing a mask, a normal part of your life. It does become uncomfortable and it can be fatiguing, but you take the necessary precaution. If it gets damp, you replace it. You do not reuse a reusable mask and these kinds of precautions so that you can keep yourself safe. They also advise that we avoid the 3 C's, which are spaces that are closed, crowded, or involve close contact. And of course, this, like I said, being practical, it does not refer to you and your family as a whole. If a person, but there are exceptions, unless a person is on home quarantine or something, but it does not speak of when you're at home in family, unless there's an exception that the person is on quarantine or something. Now, you avoid crowded or indoor settings. Sometimes it's not always possible for your events, so you take all the necessary precautions. Now, regularly and thoroughly clean your hands with alcohol-based hand rub and you wash them with soap and water. So these are actually things that we can do at the moment until we have a vaccine available. Like I said, it's easier said than done, but we have to, change our behavior, as Orin said, so that we can help not only ourselves, but we can help the vulnerable persons within our homes and our neighbors and within our workplace until we can have a vaccine available. Um, I cannot finish without speaking about mental health because this is the area that have spent the last 4 or 5 years, and it's one of the area, like I said before, it's very it's underfunded in many countries and it's taken for granted in many cases, but it's very, very, very important. Now, some of the things that you can do to take care of your own mental health, you need to keep informed. And like I said, you keep informed of information, not misinformation or disinformation. And of course, I give some tips on how you can cipher out what is information or what is misinformation or disinformation. You need to look at your sources, you need to look at your author. You also need to have a routine. Many persons say, oh, I'm at home, so I don't have to get up until 10 o'clock in the day. Not a very good idea. It's important that you have a routine, that you wake up, you have breakfast, you have your meals, you plan your work, because you may still have things that you need to get done. And you, not because you're at home, you're not going to get them done because it's a pandemic. So having a routine, it's very, very important. Maybe you have a routine when you're going to call and check up on a family member. Maybe it's a routine when you're going to help a neighbor or, go and get your stuff, but you need to maintain that routine. It's very, very important. You get up, you have a bath, you're not going to stay in your pajamas all day because it's a pandemic and you don't have to go to work. So I'll wear pajamas all day. You try to have that regular routine. Minimize news feeds. It's really important because it causes us a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. So sometimes you just say, okay, once or twice a day, I'm going to check to see how are the cases, or maybe once every other day if that's what you choose. But you try to minimize that because every time you read who's dying, who's not dying, what's happening, many times it causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear for us. So we can minimize that. Now, social contact is important. And here I want to explain that persons many times when they hear social contact, they only consider the physical. So when they hear social distancing and they just think about the physical part of it, but social contact, you need to have people, and you don't only contact them, you don't only have the social connectedness by physical contact, it can also be online, it can be via phone call, it can be via internet, and that is important. And I want to explain the difference between being alone and loneliness, because I think it's really important because of the measures that have been put in place for persons. Okay, if you are suspected, then you have to stay at home, you can't have contact with family or friends, or you have to stay in an institution. So being alone just means that there's no one else present. So being alone, it's just you in this room. Like I can say, I'm the only person in this room, and this is me being alone. Now, that is physical. Now, loneliness, it is more, it is a state of mind. It's more psychological, it's subjective, and you can have 12 persons around you and still be lonely and feel like you're not wanted. So there is a difference. So you can be alone and lonely, you can be lonely and not alone. So it can happen like that. And it's important for us to be very compassionate and empathic, because we need to understand persons might express this and you might say, well, why is she expressing that she's feeling loneliness? You know, that's not an issue. She has 12 persons living in the home. We need to be careful with that, right? Now, alcohol and drug use, I did mention that alcohol can bring a lot of problems to our mental health. And even if we're going to say that we're going to stop, it can also bring some issues for us. So if you're not using alcohol, it would be best for you to stay off during the pandemic also. Now, social media, like I said, it can be a good source of information, and we should use it, the ones that know better, to spread positive information and good information so that we can be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. So I would hope that no one here would be sharing misinformation or disinformation. I know misinformation many times it's not, you're not intentionally wanting to spread it. And that's why I say check your information before you share it. Because even though you're not doing it intentionally, you can cause a lot of harm. And a lot of people use social media for the likes and for, to spread their propaganda. So you have to be careful with that. Now, we need to help others, and that relates to family. It also relates to persons who may not be our family, but within the community, because no one can do it alone. And the pandemic has affected everyone. So there's no one that's not affected. And where we can help persons, it might be important, maybe getting their groceries because they do not have the possibility to get out. And we need to be careful when we help others, if we're going to help them and then we're going to share their pictures and stuff on social media. That might be very embarrassing for some persons, but they might not say anything because they need the help. So they don't want you to get upset and not do it again. But we should be very compassionate and think about that when we're helping others. Also, support your healthcare workers, and not only your healthcare workers, everyone that's working during this pandemic, because like I explained, COVID, public health is not just about healthcare workers. It's people from all the different disciplines. We have economists, we have everyone working towards promoting health and towards a solution for this pandemic. Also, do not discriminate. There's an issue with that because many times if a person from one family was infected with COVID-19, you find persons sometimes, want to put this stigma on the entire family. So we need to be careful with that. And even when persons are well, sometimes persons tend to say, oh no, well, that person from that family had COVID, so I don't want, we need to be very, very careful because COVID-19 can affect anyone of, it doesn't have face, race, status, it has nothing. It can affect any one of us.
He was asking you to tell us how you felt. What happened when COVID came on? Tell us what what thoughts you had and how you were able to transition into the virtual world. Because while you were in Israel, you had to literally, physically, mentally, psychologically, and socially trans transform yourself into a virtual academic world that never existed before.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of anxiety, to be honest. And most of the anxiety, it was because well, for me, I was not with my family. However, our transition into the virtual world, it was challenging, but because of the type of leadership that the Brown School of Public Health and Community Medicine, they demonstrate, we easily transitioned in the sense that, as I explained, if we needed computers, they were provided. There was infrastructure to facilitate persons using the internet, both the Wi-Fi and the data plan. There were also regular checkups to see how we were doing psychologically. There were resources that were given to us to ensure that we have the right information, because the university had their own website where they would share information with everyone that's a part of the university. That is to ensure that we get the right information. The Ministry of Health also had their page where we had access to have the accurate information. So the transition there into the virtual world for us, it was not that difficult because the infrastructure, all the resources were available. The human resources, the ICT resources, they were available. But for me personally, the anxiety was not being in my home country, because you worry if something happens to me or something happened to my family, I'm not there. But as it relates, Israel really stood tall. The Brown School of Public Health and Community Medicine stood tall in that, they provided for our well-being in every aspect. So
Very good.
there were no problems there for us to transition.
What advance or innovation do you observe in Israel during the coronavirus time?
Yeah, well, for a country that's about, I think, 60% desert, it was very surprising to see what Israel does with the little water that they have and the agriculture. We had a chance to experience how there was an agriculture, what we call it, it's like an agricultural settlement, but they were in a desert. And it's amazing to see that the produce that they have was actually taking care of that community, because they would actually export the produce. So they have a different periods of time what they would be growing. And we were amazed in the sense like, okay, for me, I was making a comparison with Guyana, saying we're the land of many waters, and many times we fail to get our products exported. And then I'm there in a country, there's a farm in the middle of the desert, and it's enough to maintain that community because they're exporting stuff. So those technology that they had in the different system, in how they would use the salt water and everything, how they would convert it, all the amazing technologies that they use, I was very impressed. Also, with the different startups, it was amazing to know that every day there's tons and tons of startups. And I think, as they say, when you have necessity, then you are forced to be innovative. And Israel really stand out there. They really stood out. They're amazing.
Okay, what challenges do you think that as human
Mhm.
beings we must have to face this new normality?
Okay. Oh wow, there are many challenges that we have to face. And I think many times it's going to be what do we do after the pandemic, because the impact remains there even after, because of the situation that the pandemic has created, temporary unemployment, or even for some people, as they say, permanent unemployment, because they don't know what's going to happen. Also, we have where children are out of schools for very long period of time. How do we reintegrate them into the school system so they're at the level they should be at when we begin again? So many times it's gonna depend on a lot of factors. Some are going to be personal factors, some are going to be community organizational factors, some are going to be national factors, and some are going to be global factors. And there's, like I said, a lot of challenges that we're gonna have to look at. But those are just some that I think it's going to really, really impact us, because especially in the education sector, we know that's one area that education is the one thing that can bring us out of poverty. Education is what I went to Israel to acquire through the Mashav scholarship so that I can become a public health specialist. Now, many persons were unable, if they were on vacation, to travel back to the countries where they were studying. So, the impact, it's great. It's great. And the challenges, there's going to be challenges that we experience now, and there's new ones that are going to appear. And we just have to, as I said, public health, we need to work as a team, and we need to now work in our communities also so that we're not just depending on the government or international support, but we're also helping each other because we're all affected by the pandemic.
Yes, yes, totally. And tell me more about your studies in Israel. How many new friends did you make in a Mashav course?
So in the Mashav course, well, as it relates to the program, I made 20 new friends in the program. Also, the staff that was there, because I can tell you one thing, the people of Israel are very welcoming. So the professors, they have more of a friendly approach in that they have no issue in you calling them by their name. That was a surprise for me because it's the first time I would have been in a university that someone does not get upset. They actually urge us. It's okay if you want to say Yehuda, that's fine. And I've never experienced that before. That was a new experience. Most universities, if you call someone doctor and they're a professor, that would be upsetting, but there was a very friendly environment, very approachable, and the people there were very welcoming to us. As it relates out of the program, I also made a lot of friends. Like I told you, I would have traveled to several what they call the provinces. To the north of Israel, I really love. So I met a lot of people out of the program. But I think the best thing was meeting other professionals within the program to see how we can continue the relationship that we began during the program. Now I'm part of the alumni group, and we are planning to actually collaborate and have partnerships so that we can develop different areas and look for different problems and find solutions within public health. You spoke to me about Tambutsai, and I actually communicate once every other day, and we even communicated today. So yes, I made some very good friends also from Nigeria. Ezekiel and I very good friends, and he's very good with immunization. That's his work. And every other day, we send messages back and forth and ask for opinions and ideas and ask each other for support. So, we've created some very strong relationships, some very important relationships for public health.
Wow, it's great to hear that. What is the next step after returning with the knowledge obtained in this course? What is the next step for you? What maybe you apply
Okay.
a position, a leadership position in your country, or maybe you continue your studies.
Okay, so I am working towards policy development within mental health and substance abuse. And at the moment, I think I mentioned it some time ago when we spoke. I am preparing for my fellowship that is also on policy development in mental health and substance abuse. So that's my next step. But I'm working towards policy development. That's the area that I love.
What words do you learn in Hebrew in Israel? Phrases maybe?
Um, if I was in Israel at this moment, I know it's night, so I would be telling everyone Laila Tov because I know it's their bedtime. But I learned Toda Haba. I learned a lot of words. I learned so many words, and they were actually surprised. I say Shmi Colleen, and they hear me say, "It's like, how did you learn all of that?" I'm like, I love Hebrew, and I really enjoy cultural diversity. So that's why I was able to learn so many of the phrases, and I used them daily. So I learned a lot of words, and I expressed it a lot. Even during my graduation, we used a lot of the words, the shalom and everything else. We used it. I love everything.
Yes, but at this moment is at night, Laila Tov in Israel, and at this moment, because this is an afternoon of our region right now. We appreciate the valuable time of Dr. Bowell, our audience in Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and the other part of Panama too, and region of South America, South America region, for sharing with us and all the wonderful experience lived in Israel, Dr. Bowell. At this time, Corona times, wow. So great experience you have in that historical moment of the planet, I said. Well, thanks for watching and see you next time in another webinar, Mashav. Toda Rabah and Laila Tov. Bye bye.
Bye bye.